This is the Corner Cutter Podcast, a consistent weekly show all about speed cubing, and you're listening to episode 55. Hey, welcome to the Corner Cutter Podcast. Podcasting since 2014. I'm your host, Josh, and this is the most consistent cubing podcast dedicated to entertain and educate you with in-depth conversations with cubers from all across the sport. My website is thecornercutterpodcast.com, and thank you so much for joining me today. If you have any questions or any feedback on anything we talked about on today's episode, feel free to reach out by email. My email address is feedback@thecornercutterpodcast.com. We haven't had this type of episode in quite a while, so we have a lot to talk about today. First, we'll go over cubing news, which is records, releases, and ratings. Then I have some podcast updates, September question of the month results, then Alga of the Week, and a few other segments as well. So it'll be a jam-packed show tonight. But I'm excited for this one. Let's jump right into cubing news. Okay, cubing news, records, releases, and ratings. Some of these records are a little bit old, but I'll just breeze over them quickly. Jeff Park got the 3x3 world record blind single. It is now 7.20. Then the square one average was broken. It is now 7.02, and that's getting so close to sub 7. It's going to be a pretty big deal when they get below 7 seconds. Then the world record clock average was broken again. It's just got broken a few weeks ago, and it is now 4.56, and that is getting super fast considering how consistent you have to be for that kind of average. Also, the 5x5 blindfolded single was broken by Stanley Chappell. It is now 3 minutes and 40 seconds. Felix Zemdegs was on a pretty big record streak it was last weekend, I think, or it was 2 weekends ago. He broke a ton of Oceania records, 6x6 mean and single. Those are now 118 and 123. 7x7, he has a 2-minute mean and a 153 single. I just noticed the Oceanic record for Pyramix average was broken. It is 3.02, and that's by Ethan Stevens. He took that away from Carl LaHood, who used to do my Pyramix race on the speed solving forums, but I haven't heard from him in a while. Now moving on to releases, YJ has released a new line of puzzles, and they are budget cubes as well. They have a new 2x2, 3x3, 5x5, 6x6, 7x7, and Pyramix and Scube. Then Fengshi released the Lim Cube Pyramix and the Lim Cube Pineapple. Pyramix looks pretty cool. And then YJ also released a budget Megamix. It's not sculpted, but it is stickerless. The Cubicle.us now has the Jiku M3 3x3. This is like the original Jiku Cube, the Smart Cube, but it doesn't have any of the internal electronics. So feels the same, but no electronics, and so it's a lot cheaper. So if you liked the feel of the Jiku Cube, this one would be comp legal. The last official release I have for you guys today is the GAN 356X. This was This is the successor to the GAN Air SM, and this was debuted at the Red Bull Championships in Boston. It features a new tensioning system and has a set of interchangeable magnet capsules. So you're able to customize how strong the magnets are. And just as a heads up, this cube is on the cubicle for $62. So getting really pricey, and this kind of goes back to what we were talking about in last week's episode on Cubu Chats about how expensive GAN's cubes are getting. And then I have a few unofficial releases, but hints that companies have put out about upcoming puzzles. It was last month by now, Qi hinted at a Valk 3, a new version of the Valk 3. So it features interchangeable magnets, so that seems what the new thing is for cubes nowadays. Not just magnets, interchangeable magnets. So you can customize the feel without magnetizing it yourself. It looks like Moyu is releasing a new 7x7. It's hard to tell, but will it stand up to the Haze 7? You got a world record 7x7 holder helping design the Haze 7, so you never know. I'm gonna guess it's not going to be as good as the Haze 7. GAN's hinting at a new 4x4, and that will replace the GAN 460. X-Man Designs is hinting at a 4x4 as well. Could it be the Valk 4? We don't know yet. So this is something we have to keep an eye on in the future. And then Moyu also, it looks like it's releasing a new magnetics cube. And then it looks like GAN might be releasing a 356R, which is a GAN budget model. And this actually would be really nice. I don't know what about GAN makes their cubes so expensive. Is it like the name brand, or are they manufacturing the cubes in a certain way that makes them price them that high? Also, it looks like GAN's working on a 5x5, and they're really working on a Megaminx. Felix is using their prototype Megaminx right now, and it seems like it's considerably better than the Galaxy V2M. So it does look like GAN might take over the Megaminx market like Yushin did with the Haze 7. Instead of rating a cube this week, I decided to rate a page on the speedsolving.com forums. And that is a new resources page. PJK, one of the head guys on the forums, and a bunch of the forum members helped in putting this together. And it's a super helpful page. Looking over the threads, some of the main things are most useful threads on speed solving. What cube should I get? There's a thread for that. Intro to speed cubing for beginners. That's on Wiki, the Wiki section of speed solving. Links to the algorithm database, different guys' websites for like Sile the King's algs, Cube Skills algs, some of the best cubing timers, some of the best timer apps, a whole bunch of trainers, all the best threads on blind solving and different resources there, links to competition websites, including the Speed Solving Forums competition and the World Cube Association, big list of puzzle shops on where to buy cubes, list of cubing podcasts. I added that. There's the Corner Cutter podcast, the Sony podcast, Layer by Layer, and the Interactive Cubers. And then finally, a list of online cubing communities includes the Speed Solving Forum, the All Cubers group on Reddit, and the Cubics Friends Facebook group. So I'll have a link in the show notes to this episode to that page, and it's also on the resources page on my website, thecornercutterpodcast.com. Let's move on to Alg of the Week. I asked the other week that you send your favorite algorithms in, and Cosmo sent his in. He has more feedback, which I'll get to in the shout-out section, but his favorite algorithm is this T-perm, which is the normal T-perm that most people do. And this is the one of the few times that I allow cubing in the podcast. And this algorithm is R, U, R prime, U prime, R prime, F, R2, U prime, R prime, U prime, R, U, R prime, F prime. Fun alg, super quick. The F going into the R can be a little tricky sometimes, but still a fun algorithm. Thanks, Cosmo, for sending that in. Let's move on to the September question of the month results. I know it's been a while since September, but the podcast weren't scheduled in the right way where we could have this segment right at the end of September, so no worries about that. We might have another question in the beginning of November. We'll see. So last month's question was, what was your first encounter with the Rubik's Cube up to when you learned to solve it? And I wanted that story. So Soccer Turtle Cuber sent in his answer, and it was an audio answer, which I love. Thank you for sending that in. Here it is.
Okay, so this is in response to the September question of the month. And so I first came across the cube. Pretty much I've had a cube lying around my house my whole life because my mom got one in the 80s. And I never really tried to solve it. Every once in a while I would pick it up and do a few turns, but I didn't really put any thought into it. So it wasn't until about 2 years ago that a friend of mine from school brought one in a little after Black Friday because he had gotten it for Black Friday, and he knew how to solve it. And I thought that was pretty cool, so I went home and I learned how to solve it. Well, I tried to, and I just couldn't do it on my mom's old cube. So I ended up going to the store and buying a Rubik's 2.0, which I know isn't like the best option, but it was definitely better than the one I had, and I didn't know any better. I was just a non-cuber. So I got that, and I learned how to solve it. And eventually I upgraded, and my times dropped by like 10 seconds. So yeah, that is my response to September question of the month.
Thanks, Soccer Turtle, for sending that in. I love to hear you guys' stories. And my answer. Okay, so I sort of covered this in the International Podcast Day episode, but I'll tell it again. My dad got us a family Christmas present, and it happened to be a Rubik's Cube. So we opened it up, and that's like one of the first times I had seen a Rubik's Cube or actually touched one. So we opened it up, and I was looking at it, and it was like so nice. And then my dad got it, and he scrambled it up. And I was like, no, why did you do that? We'll never get it back. It was so nice. And it came with a little stand, and we sat. My dad got the green side solved once. It was the incorrect permutation, but there was green on one side. So that was like a start, and that was from the Rubik's Cube sheet directions that came with the cube. So, at least a year or so went by. I've picked up the cube sometimes just to try to get one side done. There was like this one time that I said, I'm gonna solve this thing with the directions. So I studied the directions really hard. I couldn't get anywhere. So my dad found a PDF that he downloaded for me on how to solve the Rubik's Cube. I couldn't understand it. I got one side done. I think it was the green or orange side, and I got that side done in the correct. It wasn't the correct permutation again, because I didn't understand that it had to be lined up like that. So that was a little bit of a start, and I was like, I can't move on. I had no idea how to keep going. So my dad looked up a video on how to solve it, and it happened to be Dan Brown's tutorial on how to solve a Rubik's Cube. And it worked. It took me, I'm pretty sure I solved it that day, that I watched the video. And I was super happy that I had solved it. I mean, of course, that method is not very good at all, because it's easy to learn that one because there's lots of R prime. I mean, remember R prime, D prime, R, D. And that's what I learned. And it looked so nice when it was solved. So that's my story. Let's move on to some podcast updates. And one thing I heard on a podcast about podcasting recently, it was a call-in, or someone said that he tries to implement one thing he had learned from the podcast episode every week. So every episode of the podcast, it got a little bit better. And that's what I've been trying to do, but I think I'll make it a point now and point it out to you guys. One thing that I have improved on the podcast, sometimes multiple. That's what I like doing. So sometimes it'll be one, sometimes it'll be multiple. But I'm going to try hard to have at least one thing every week to tell you guys that I improved on the Corner Cutter podcast. So this past week, or I guess it's been about this past week, but I've been working on it a little longer than this. I signed up for another Amazon Associates account. So you guys it's another way to support the show. You can use my Amazon affiliate link when you order anything. And that's right, anything from Amazon. So if you're younger, teen, or younger than that, ask your parents to use it when they order from Amazon. All they have to do is go to thecornercutterpodcast.com/support, and it's the first link right there, Amazon.com. So just click on that before you hit complete order. And another thing recommended by a listener of the podcast, PJK on Speed Solving, recommended that I add timestamps to the episodes. I have done this for the past 3, and it is working good, a lot easier than I thought. He also recommended I add clickable buttons like on YouTube so you can jump right to that specific point in the episode. I'm looking into doing that right now, so we'll have to see how hard that is. But timestamps, they look really good in the show notes and helpful if you want to listen back to something or or you really wanted to skip to a certain part of the show. Those are the 2 updates I can talk about this week, and I'll definitely have more next week. Let's move on to shoutouts. So we have a few shoutouts this week. And first one is an Apple Podcasts review. It's a 5-star review from Dragon United 18. And this is in the USA iTunes store or Apple Podcast store. He said, "I'm here every week for the new podcast. I am so impressed. I am a new cuber and this has been so informative in getting me caught up in the community. Definitely recommend this to all cubers." Thank you for that awesome review. I definitely appreciate you taking the time to do this, because I know it's not always the easiest thing to write a review. You gotta sit down, open up Apple Podcasts, and type something, which sometimes can be hard. So thank you for doing that. If you want to, I might have a little something for you. Please reach out by email. My email address is feedback@thecornercutterpodcast.com. Next email I got is from Rustin. He said, "Hey, I really enjoy your podcast and your content. Your content is great. I'm working on getting a YouTube channel, and I would love to be on your podcast sometime." He said he thought a debate on the Red Bull Championships would be interesting. He said he would be against it. So yeah, I've gotten a lot of good feedback on that debate show. So there should be another one coming up soon. And then he asked if any of the magnets for the clock are still available. So, one thing about those clock magnets, I am selling all the magnets you need for making your clock magnetic. So it's the round disc magnets with the hole in the middle and the small ones you need for the pins. All for $15. Otherwise, you have to buy some from China or from the US, and the ring magnets are from the UK, so it can get expensive. But I'm selling all the magnets you need to make a magnetic clock. If you're interested, please send me an email, feedback@thecornercutterpodcast.com. Then final email is from Cosmo. "I just wanted to say that you've been doing a great job. Keep up the good work. I have a question for you. What is your favorite episode? I can't choose. They are all so great." Thanks, Cosmo. Thanks for the praise. I'm proud of some of them and not so proud of others, but some episodes that I don't think I have a specific favorite episode. I've talked to so many awesome people and had so many fun shows. I really liked episode 50 with the history of the podcast and stuff like that. I got my brother on. That was fun. Shivam Bonsal's interview was a fun one. That was episode 45, and he's the multi-blind world record holder. DG Cubes was fun. Looking back in the catalog a little further, JCB Short Films, Jack, that's who I had on. That show was How to Be a Successful YouTuber. He dropped some amazing value bombs in that episode on how to make good videos and stuff like that. So I enjoyed that one. Eric Zhao's interview was fun. He gave some good information. And then, of course, Sean from Speed Cube Review. That was a fun one as well. So, as you can probably tell, I don't have a favorite. I've skipped a lot. Will Callen was fun. The interview with Phil Yu was awesome. Best in Budget Cubes, that was a popular episode. And I enjoyed recording that one. So, As you can tell, I don't have a favorite episode. Some of the episodes I really enjoyed putting together or like coming up with planning or stuff like that. The Cubing USA Regional Championships episode, the review of them where I brought on 3 delegates. I enjoyed planning that one and doing that. The International Podcast Day episode was fun. And what other unique shows did I do? The debate. That was a fun one. Something a little different, something that's not normal, something you haven't seen happen in a cubing podcast before. So I enjoyed those. Cosmo also said that he used the contact form and where did you find the podcast? I always ask that. He said, I've been listening to this podcast since almost the beginning and have been a big fan since. So thank you, Cosmo, for being a fan. I really appreciate you. And that wraps up shoutouts. Thank you, everybody, for sending your feedback in. If you want to send in any feedback, go to thecornercutterpodcast.com/feedback. A little bit of a personal cubing update, or I guess more of a personal update. Something I really enjoyed doing recently was I went to a few local mountain biking demos. I mentioned in the other episode a few weeks ago, I really love mountain biking. It's my favorite active sport. The important keyword there is active. I love fishing as well. I just love racing around, going on those booms, finding obstacles to go over. It's really my kind of sport. And I really wish I had my own mountain bike right now, but I'm saving up for a truck. So most of the money I make right now is going towards saving for that truck. Also, the reason this episode is I wanted this episode to go out Monday or Tuesday, but I guess I didn't take into account last week when I said Monday or Tuesday that I had a big test on Wednesday, which is today, the day I'm recording. I'm happy to say I passed that test, and so now, that's why I'm recording the podcast now. I can focus on other things now instead of studying, which feels great. And then a little announcement on next week's guest. That will be Jaden McNeil from Australia. So we're currently setting up the time to record, and I'm very excited for that interview. But that's about it for this week. If you have a 2x2 handy, or you can easily grab one, make sure to stick around after the outro music to do a 2-blind solve a little different way than last time. So it's going to be like a team 2-blind solve. But anyway, that's it for this week. If you have any questions or any feedback for the show, please email in feedback@thecornercutterpodcast.com, and always check the website for episode notes and other resources and updates I post on there as well. Just go to thecornercutterpodcast.com. So now it's time to take this episode back to the scrambling table, and I'll talk to you guys again next week in episode 56 of the Corner Cutter Podcast. Okay, so now it's time for the Team 2-Blind Solve, and this was inspired by Max, who was featured on last week's show. So the scramble is white on top, green in the front, U prime, R, U, R prime, U, R2, F, R prime, U prime. Okay. So the solve is going to be z. So you have the green on the bottom. So I'm going to do L prime U L2 U2 L prime. Then you do a U prime for the CLL. R prime U R prime F U prime R U F2 R2, and then a U to solve it. Okay, it should be solved. Once again, thank you for listening to this episode and being a part of the TCCP community. I really appreciate you. Talk to you next week.